news. So let's welcome her to the show now. It's Sarah Pochin, MP for Runcorn and Helsby. Hello and good afternoon to you, Sarah. How are you doing?
Hi, Alex. I'm really well. Lovely to be on your show. Thank you for asking me.
How's it been so far, by the way? You know, because it's not very often I speak to a brand new shiny MP. Are you finding the ropes?
It's a roller coaster. I think because there's only 5 of us, of course, currently in reform, then there's an awful lot of work to do. So in terms of actually getting established as a new MP, there's a lot to do on that front. But there's so much work to do as well. So, yeah, I'm crazy busy, but absolutely loving it.
Good, that's what we like to hear. Now, let's talk first of all about the UK net migration figures. Apparently there are warnings of dire worker shortages because net migration has come down by half. I mean, I would say brilliant, great, net migration's down by half. Can we bring it down by 100%? That would suit me. But this does have the potential to impact on the economy, where so many companies, quite frankly, lazily, have become very attached to getting in cheaper foreign labour.
Look, what's really important about these figures that have come out is we've heard net migration has gone down to 437,000. That is a town the size of Bristol. That is nothing to be proud of, and it's certainly nothing that this Labour government have achieved themselves. But what the key is that we need to think about is who is leaving and who is coming in. So we know that since this Labour government has come into power, that the multi-millionaires or just millionaires are leaving in their droves. Now, those are the taxpayers, those are the people we need in this country. So I would like to understand exactly from this government what kind of profile is coming in and what are the profiles of those that are leaving, because I have a feeling that this is no good for our economy, but not necessarily for the reasons that you were indicating there, Alex, in terms of actually, workforce available, but it's definitely not in the interest of the country in terms of the economy.
I mean, people are talking about things like a crisis in the care sector in particular, given how many people we need to top up our public services. We always hear as well, don't we? Oh, well, we need immigration for the NHS, all the hard-working doctors and nurses. Always got to say hard-working doctors and nurses if you mention the NHS. It's like there's some sort of unwritten political rule on that. And that actually, cutting the numbers of people coming in could have a very serious impact on such sectors.
Look, the fact is that we currently have a population of what we call NEETs, currently not in employment or training, of age range between 16 and 24-year-olds, which are not in work, which are not in training, not in education. Why not, Alex? Because that level of available workforce to us are not contributing currently to society, but they are claiming benefits. So that has got to stop. We are in this culture at the moment where we are not getting up in the mornings, not setting our alarms, not getting out to work. Those people, if they wanted jobs, even if it might not be the career job that they want, but they can certainly get out there and work. We could be filling these places with our own people. So we've got to stop this. The benefit culture is just too easy in this country.
Well, I tend to agree with you on that one. Let's talk now about reform in local government, because much like you, Sarah, there are men and women up and down the country, hundreds of them in fact, who find themselves not just Reform UK councillors for the first time, but councillors for the first time. And like you, they're going to be pretty busy and facing one heck of a learning curve. Well, apparently Durham, which is now a Reform-run council, have already got out of the starters blocks and done exactly what they said they were going to do by taking down all of the virtue signalling flags from its public buildings, including the Ukrainian flag, and facing a bit of a backlash for it.
Look, in my opinion, all of these public buildings should be flying the flag of our country. We should be flying the Union Jack. Of course, on certain days, we have, St George's Day or whatever day it might be, there are appropriate flags to fly on different days. But, we should all be loud and proud about flying the Union Jack. So as far as that's concerned, I don't really have an issue with that. But what I would say about these new councillors, people are saying it's almost like they're waiting for reform to fail. Well, I was a borough councillor for 8 years. I know that when you first go in as a borough councillor or a county councillor, council or whatever it might be. Yes, it's a steep learning curve, but we've got high quality individuals now in this party, people that know what they're doing. I know that the council leaders that are in place that will be responsible for the new groups, the 10 councils that we've now got control of, are a high calibre person. I've met some of them. I'm very impressed with them. I have no doubt in my mind that reform is going to make a huge success out of running these councils and, most importantly, cutting waste.
Right, I wanted to ask you about some of these policies, actually, because as well as doging the districts, I'd be interested to know how that is going to be conducted and whether it's actually going to add to the costs of a council to perform such a broad-reaching audit. But also in terms of stopping migrant hotels and migrants being put into private rental accommodation. That's been one of Reform's big policies in this local election. I understand there is a sort of star chamber of barristers who are actually working pro bono to try and make sure that some of these plans can be scuppered. What happens if they don't manage to achieve it, though? What if it goes to court and the court says, sorry, this is the law of the land, this has been imposed on you by the Home Office, you've got to get on with it? What then?
Look, the fact is that successive governments have failed to tackle this immigration problem. The current policy of using hotels, I've got one in my constituency of Runcorn and Helsby, where I am now, the Daresbury Hotel, to house illegal immigrants has been a disaster, because it's just in the community, they're not contributing to the community, and it's causing unrest with local residents. What's happening now, Labour saying they're going to shut these hotels down and move these residents out into the community, into houses of multiple occupancy. So in other words, here in Runcorn, we've had, we've got in our communities, houses with maybe 10, 15 young men in them, 3-bedroomed houses designed for families living in the community. That is only going to cause problems. Yes, Reform's policy is to do something about that. Yes, we want to, certainly in terms of the asylum hotels, shut them down, move those people out, move them to a location where they'll be processed and sent home. Anyone that comes here illegally will be sent home if Reform's in government, when Reform is in government. The risk, Alex, is the people that have gone into the houses of multiple occupancy that are out in the community, because once they're out in the community, they are very difficult to keep track of. And that's where you get the problem of grooming gangs, of drug dealing gangs, of people trafficking, and a whole new level of very dark crime starts.
Yeah, I want to ask you about some of that in just a moment. But quick question before we move on to things such as women's safety. I know that it's a passion of yours. Well, sounds funny, a passion of yours, but a subject you're very keen to keep in the public eye. The doging of local councils, how's that going to be paid for? How are these audits going to be conducted?
Well, the whole point is it saves money. I know from my experience, both as 20 years as a magistrate and 8 years as a borough councillor, the money that is wasted on translation services, for example. I mean, I can't tell you, the cost of translating something into 14 languages, I think it was, in the area that I was a councillor for. So this DOGE, if you'd like to call it that, this Department of Government Efficiency, isn't it, I think, that is all about saving money. So yes, it will, I guess, cost money to do some of these things, but the whole point is we're saving millions by doing these sort of initiatives, not having, officers that are, when I say officers, I mean council workers, council officers, employees that are there simply to think up some new pronouns or new woke policies. That all has to go. Reform is about common sense, and that is what these 10 councils will instill back into the community.
Now, I've often thought it's pretty commonsensical that if you're getting young men from countries where women have to dress up like ghosts, a bit of anger will send them all berserk, where stoning a woman for, I don't know, having her hair down is considered normal practice, that if you extract men from countries with those sorts of belief systems and dump them into the UK, they don't suddenly have a lobotomy and change their opinions on women, and that's going to be a pretty dangerous cocktail. You mentioned earlier about when these young men are going into private rental accommodation and they cannot be monitored, the sort of impact that could have on the local community. How concerned are you about women's safety today?
Well, I'm very concerned here for my constituency in this area of Runcorn, because I saw through the campaign, ladies would come in with me, very brave ladies come in to show me CCTV of nighttime activity of houses in their street, men clearly drug dealing going on, men arriving with knives. I've seen the footage. Yes, it's been reported to the police, but I've seen it with my own eyes. Even stories of taxis of young women being dropped off at night and being picked up in the morning. Disgraceful behaviour, shameful things are going on, things that people are frightened about that they shouldn't have to put up with. The fact is that women's safety is at risk. We know from evidence, from figures, that the ethnic minorities groups, there's a higher level of attack on white Western women like myself than any other group. That is a fact. We can't escape it. It just takes somebody like myself who's brave enough to stand up and say, we need to face up to these facts and do something about it. And this government, I believe, is in denial about these policies on how to integrate these illegal immigrants into society. But the other thing I would say, which is really scary, we've been talking about illegal immigrants here. There is a whole element of our society now which are here legally and living here, which have severely anti-women views. And that is something that we're not talking about, which we should be talking about.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I just don't know what the solution is, especially people who are here legally might even be born in this country. What on earth can we do if they hold these sort of horrible medieval misogynistic attitudes towards women? What can we do to change that?
I'll tell you what we do for a start. We stop putting into prison for ridiculously long prison sentences. And as I say, I was a magistrate for 20 years, so I'm speaking with some experience. Stop putting people into prison, like, for example, Lucy Connolly. I am not undermining what she said, but to have her in prison for, I think it's 31 months with no parole, no possibility of seeing her children, whatever it is. I mean, let's get some perspective on this.
Are you surprised she's in prison at all, actually? Do you think that she'd had an actual, because as a former magistrate, do you think if she'd had an actual court case rather than be told to plead guilty, that she would have even ended up incarcerated?
No, I don't. And all this stuff that's come out this week about from the Labour government about the David Gauke prison review would just point to that. It's absolutely ridiculous. But the point I want to make, Alex, which is really important, is you just have to go on to social media and you look at some of the hate preaching that's going on social media unchecked. Why are those people not being arrested and put into prison? Because they're the women haters, but much more than that, they hate this Western society, but they are here. It's not being clamped down on. They are free to spread their hate, and they're not being arrested and they're not being put into prison. In fact, why are they even here?
Well, I couldn't agree more, quite frankly. And I think we've become really livid about dealing with some of these deeply urgent issues. Women and girls thrown under the bus, but just because of wokery, because of not upsetting some communities. I'm sorry, that's not a civilised society. I want to ask you about your campaign. I mean, you wouldn't... Had you run ever before for a general election?
I ran in 2017 up in Bolton South East. That was when Theresa May was the Prime Minister. So that was back in the day when I was a Conservative. I left the Conservatives in 2020, so 5 years ago. But back then, and of course there wasn't reform back then, so I didn't have this option. But a huge privilege to be chosen as the candidate to represent reform in this by-election. And now a huge privilege to have won and be representing the constituents.
How was that campaign, though? I mean, were there dirty tricks? Did you come under a lot of attack? Some people, in this day and age, politics has become really nasty. And I don't just mean from, the other parties who come up with all sorts of accusations and smear you and put things in the press, which is bad enough. But the level of intimidation as well, and sort of threats to safety that now happens in politics. Listening to some of the horrible things that happened to Andrea Jenkins, I just wanted to know how your campaign was. Was it all sort of neat, clean and sportsmanlike? Was it all cricket? Or did you feel it was pretty unpleasant?
Well, do you know what? I had an amazing team that looked after me literally so well. No, I didn't feel threatened. I have to say that the general people here in Runcorn and Helsby, they're hardworking people. They just want fairness. They just want someone to stand up for them for what is right. I'm a strong voice. I'm a brave voice. As I say, I've worked in the courts for 20 years. There's not much I haven't seen or had thrown at me over that time. So, and the other thing, with respect to dirty tricks, look, Reform now have the highest standards of choosing their candidates. And I was thoroughly vetted. Nobody I don't think anyone who's been around as long as I have would say there's no skeletons in their cupboard, but there's certainly nothing that I hope would ever bring the party into disrepute. So, I hope that I'm a safe pair of hands for them.
Oh, well, pleased to hear that one, Sarah. Now, before I let you go, it'd be remiss of me not to ask about that ugly battle that happened between Rupert Lowe and Reform UK. I mean, he's very much on the outside now, doing the proverbial back inside the tent. It wasn't a very edifying, set of circumstances, was it? How hard has it been for you? I mean, people must ask this question of you all the time. How hard was it to enter a party in the midst of all of that?
Actually, they do ask me, and I can't understand why. It's history. I described Rupert Lowe as white noise, I think, on Newsnight the other night. And that's what he is. I'm busy getting on with some really serious issues, raising the issues of, that we've been talking about. I've been talking about a lot about prisons this week, raising the issues of safety of everyone, not just women and girls, raising issues of immigration. And people want to ask me about Rupert Lowe. Look, he's irrelevant. I've met him once very briefly on the terraces, actually, in Parliament, but that was only last week. I came in after the whole Rupert Lowe saga. Do you know what? It's politics. Look at the Labour Party. Look at the Conservative Party. They have endless scandals to deal with. This wasn't even a scandal, but they have endless scandals to deal with. This was just a falling out. It's really before my time. I'm not interested. I've got far more important things to talk to people like you about, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'd be unfair because it was before your time of asking how you think the party handled it. I don't believe in sort of doing gotchas like that. Sarah Pochin, thank you ever so much for coming on to the programme today.